Okay, so you've definitely seen a trombone before, right? Maybe in your school band or, at a parade, but I'm gonna bet you have no idea that it has this secret identity. Today, we're diving deep. We're going on a quest to figure out how this instrument, which looks kind of simple, actually lived a double life and became a total musical powerhouse. So let's start with a question. What could a giant, super echoey cathedral and a massive, loud street party possibly have in common? I mean, they sound like total opposites, don't they? Well, the answer is the hero of our story today, the trombone. I know. Just stick with me and I promise it's all gonna make sense.
All right, to solve this riddle, we gotta jump in the time machine. We're going way, way back, like to the 15th century, to meet the trombone's well, you get it, its grandparent. So let's dive into our first chapter, the original push-pull machine. So before it was the trombone, it had this kind of goofy name, the sackbut. Yeah, I know, it sounds a little weird, but believe it or not, it makes total sense. It actually comes from an old French phrase that literally means push-pull. And what's the one thing you do with a trombone? You guessed it. You push and pull that slide. See? It was right there in the name the whole time.
Okay, and what's so cool about this slide is how it works. For all you gamers out there, the best way to think about it is like the joystick on your controller. You know how just a tiny little nudge can make your character jump or turn or do a super precise move? It's the exact same idea. The smallest movement of that trombone slide completely changes the note. We're talking a ton of precision here. So how does all that pushing and pulling actually create music? Well, it's actually a super simple three-step process. Step 1, the player buzzes their lips into the mouthpiece. Step 2, that joystick slide we just talked about moves in and out, which changes how long the metal tube is. And step 3, that buzz travels all the way through the tube and comes blasting out the bell as sound. Boom, music. Okay, so we know what this thing is and we know how it works. So now let's get back to that riddle and the trombone's first major job. Let's go ahead and step inside that giant cathedral, where this thing was used to literally create the sound of the heavens. So composers back in the day, they figured something out that was pretty special. Inside those huge, echoey cathedrals, the sound of the sackbut was just perfect. It wasn't all screechy or harsh. Its tone was really noble and serious. This quote here says it all. It blended perfectly with human voices and added this sense of majesty. It just made everything feel more grand, more important. So here's another way to think about it, especially if you're a gamer. In the world of church music, the trombone was the ultimate support player. Okay, if the choir was the main character, the trombone's job was to give it a power-up, a buff, right? It would double the notes the singers were singing, which made the whole team just sound fuller, stronger, and honestly, way more epic. But, and this is where it gets really interesting, the trombone was living a secret double life. Because when it wasn't being all serious and majestic in church, it had a completely different job out on the streets. So let's talk about its second gig, becoming the town's official soundtrack. See, pretty much every town had these official musicians called pipers, and you can basically think of them as the city's DJs. Seriously. Their job was to play music for every single big event, parades, festivals, you name it. And what was their go-to instrument when they needed to be heard over a massive crowd? You guessed it, the trombone. It was literally their loudspeaker, perfect for blasting out these huge fanfares and letting everybody know, hey, the party is starting. And this just shows you it's two completely different identities, side by side. In the church, it was all about being solemn, supportive, blending in. But out in the town, whoa, complete opposite. It was loud, it was celebratory, and it was designed to get everyone's attention. We're talking about the same instrument here, but with two totally different missions. So what happens when all these brilliant composers start to realize that this one instrument can be both super emotional and incredibly powerful? Well, during the next big musical era, the Baroque period, it becomes their secret weapon. This is when the musical geniuses of the time really started to pay attention. You had guys like Giovanni Gabrieli and the famous St. Mark's Basilica in Venice, and Heinrich Schütz in Germany's huge churches. They started to realize the trombone's true power. They figured out it could do way more than just play backup. It could actually define the entire sound of their music. So what was the trombone's new mission briefing in the orchestra? Okay, job number 1, anchor the whole sound with a really strong bass line. Job 2, fill out the harmony. Just make everything sound richer and fuller. 3, keep doing what you do best, blending perfectly with all the other instruments.
And finally, the big one. Start playing in teams. You've got alto, tenor, and bass trombones all working together to create this one massive unified brass sound. So cool. This all sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? But playing the trombone back then required a very specific set of skills. So if you wanted to be like a Baroque-era trombone star, here's a quick guide to what you'd need to master. All right, here's your pro player skill checklist. First up, smoothness. This is a style called legato, where you connect all the notes seamlessly. Next, that precise slide control we talked about, absolutely non-negotiable. You had to be perfect. Third, you had to have very limited vibrato. You know that shaky, wobbly sound you sometimes hear on a note? Nope, not here. The tone had to be pure and straight. And finally, you needed super clear articulation to absolutely nail all those fast parts. So, what's the big takeaway from all this? At the end of the day, the trombone's real superpower is its incredible versatility. I mean, just think about it. It was just as comfortable creating this feeling of heavenly peace inside a church as it was hyping up a massive crowd at a festival. That ability to be two completely different things at once, that's what made it so essential. And that brings me to one last question for you. From the quietest, most serious church music to the loudest party in the town square, the trombone was the instrument for the job. So my question is, what instrument do you think is that versatile today? You know, the one you can hear in almost every single style of music? I want to hear what you think. Let me know down in the comments.